Good afternoon, Barbara. Barbara Cervenka, formerly Sister
James
Annette. And you got your name. I see your dad's name was James.
My dad's name is James. My stepmother was Annette.
Annette, okay.
Yeah.
That's nice. And you picked the name.
I did.
You chose it.
I did.
Okay. Well, thanks for being with us. Now, we've only got 30 minutes to get a few years
entire
in.
lifetime.
Yeah, yes. So can we begin with where you began? In Cleveland?
We can, yes. I was born in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. I was born in 1939 in September, and it really fascinating, because doing this made me think about this a little bit. And, I was born the month that Hitler invaded Poland, September of 1939. And I was born into a Polish community.
Interesting.
I was born the year that Hitler that took over Czechoslovakia. And my dad is Bohemian, so Czech. And so, as I look back now, I think, oh my gosh, well, of course, what do when you're a kid, you don't know anything.
You didn't realize, yeah.
But you think about how people must have been so affected by all of these events that were going on.
Definitely.
When we were little kids.
And were you the oldest?
I'm the first. I was the oldest. I only have one sister, Anita. I had Anita. And I was born to really wonderful people. Jim, my dad, Jim. My mother was Florence. It was, they were just smart and great people, I think.
Did you ever have time to talk to your dad about what life was like back when they started their family and the start of the war?
I didn't. My dad talked about it a little bit. He never was inducted into the war. He was never inducted into service. He said once that he was lucky in that when they were, drafting single men, he was just married.
Okay.
And when they were drafting single men who were married, I had been born. And then when they were drafting people with one child, Anita was born. So he just was,
Missed everything.
And I was so grateful for that. I was so grateful when I look back that he never had to go through the trauma, the terrible things that, people who went through that war were subjected to. So, yeah. No.
And then your mom died
My mom died when I was 5.
Yeah.
She was only 37. She died of Hodgkin's disease. And so that was probably one of the hardest events that really changed our whole lives.
Right.
Mine and Anita's, yeah.
And so how old was she?
She was only 2.
Okay.
So
you were the big sister?
Yes, that's right. As a matter of fact, that's what I was, and I never really let her forget it too easily.
So yeah.
So, but we went to live with my grandparents, my mother's mother, and this was really, again, when I think back, when I was a kid, I was that must have been such a burden for her to take us on, but my aunts, my mother was one of 5, really more than that. My grandmother lost a lot of her children, but there were 3 of my aunts who were really with us all the way through our lives, and they were great people. And my aunt told me, that how happy my grandmother had been that at least she had us when she lost, her daughter, my mother. So we lived with my grandmother, and she was, and we became part of that family. All these aunts and uncles. They came every week, and that's what people did. They just gathered around on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, and they shared supper, and they talked, and we all listened to the news. We listened to Walter Winchell. I, in my sixth or 7 years,
Yep, that's right.
And so it was a very nice way to grow up, my grandmother, at one point, we went to live with my other grandmother. And I later learned that Grandma had cancer. And she had to let us go over to this other, which was only a few doors away.
Yeah.
My dad and my
Kind of all
mother's
the
family
family
were
lived
just,
together, yeah.
within a half a block of each other. But then my other grandmother died, and so Grandma Balzer came back and brought us back, and we lived there.
A lot of loss.
A lot of
Early loss.
Yeah.
A lot of loss in your life.
My
period,
my grandfather also died when we were there, when we were kids. So yeah, and really when I was about 10, Dad married again to one of the women. We knew her very well. She worked just down the street from us. She was we liked her a lot. And we moved then to a new house and a new place, a little bit distant, not too far, maybe 3 or 4 miles away, to Shaker Heights, and lived there until we grew up there, until I was in 5th grade at that point. So the nice thing about that move, that time, was that my dad bought the yard. The lot next to us was an open lot. And it was probably one of the few open, empty lots in that neighborhood. And he bought it. And it was the beginning for him, of something that was just really salvific, because he
Right.
started a garden.
The garden.
He had always he thought he wanted to be a farmer. And then he realized, that it wasn't the time for that. And so he started this garden. My dad's father lived out in the country. He had a farm out in the country. And every Sunday, of course, we'd go out to the farm. We'd go to my grandmother's or we'd go to my grandfather's farm. And Dad would come back, he'd go and dig in the woods, and he'd bring back bushel baskets of humus, of leaves and things like this, really rich earth. And he'd just put it out on this thing. And he'd get topsoil from places where they were building new homes, and he built up the ground in this place. And so by the time he really started planting this garden, it was so fertile and the ground was so rich. He could throw seeds. In fact, we had trees that grew in that garden that the squirrels planted. Suddenly, there'd be a peach tree that would be growing, and my dad would be so delighted with that.
You didn't know about those intelligent squirrels, huh?
Well, but that could, because anything grew in this garden. My dad got all of the genes for gardening. I have none, but
Isn't that his garden that you put up over at Weber? I mean, right outside the center shop.
it's a piece that's dedicated to my dad.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity of painting that a piece, making a large painting when I was at Michigan, and I wanted to do something that was in his honor. And so I thought nothing would be probably more fitting than painting flowers. That piece, is really the story of a garden. It starts with spring flowers, and it ends with flowers in the very late fall. And underneath it are little scenes from his own garden.
Yeah.
And the dates that are there are dates that were significant in his life. And so I never could really plant a garden. I'm a really poor gardener.
But you have planted many other things.
But I could paint, and so that
Yes.
was the way I wanted to honor him.
Now, just to go back a little, what about your schooling? You went to school?
Oh, well, we went to school, both Anita and I. We were part of this Polish community, really. And so we went to Our Lady of Częstochowa Parish in Cleveland. They went all through grade school, and Anita did too. And they were Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth, very good women, very staunch teachers. And then when it was time for high school, we had just opened up Holben. Dominican High School was not too far from us. I had kind of not wanted particularly to go to Holben because it was such a new school. but my dad wanted me to go to Hoban because it was close.
Yeah.
And so I went to
You
Hoban.
did what your dad wanted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great time that was. It was a really wonderful
Mm-hmm.
place. I really, I found them very interesting years, good
And
years.
the Dominicans were there. The
we
Adrian
we were
Dominicans
there. We
Yeah.
were there. And we had, they were such good teachers. And they were such nice people and smart people.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really fun.
Yeah.
There were a lot of wonderful energy. Sister John Mary and Noreen Marie,
Yeah.
George,
Yeah.
and just people that were excellent teachers, and they kind of, I think, fed my imagination a lot.
Okay, so maybe that's where you got. Was that where you could say your creativity?
Well, I took
unearthed
art
itself?
all the way
Okay.
through. I had wonderful,
Okay.
again, Mary Joseph Kennedy was
Oh
there.
my goodness.
And Sister Louis Marie, who taught calligraphy.
That's right. Were you at that thing in that spirituality thing in Melbourne that
No,
once? Oh, you
no,
weren't
I was
part of
never
that.
there.
Okay.
I was never there, but they were. I took art all 4 years of high school, and so I really loved it. I mean, I drew when I was a kid, and I learned to draw a little bit more. Learned a lot about calligraphy, which stood me in great stead when I had to make bulletin boards and things like that. So
Who taught you how to take notes?
I think I just kind of learned
Oh
how
my
to do
gosh.
that.
You're so interesting to watch at a meeting.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, those notes are just so perfect.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm kind of organized.
Yes,
Yeah,
very
I'm
organized.
maybe
Yeah.
a little too.
So was there some nun in particular that perhaps was a mentor for you when you were in high school or grade school?
I think Sister John Mary,
John Mary.
Pat Hogan,
Yeah, I know.
was,
I know her.
and she was, such a good woman, so smart, and so she had such a wicked sense of humor.
she did.
I really, really loved that. So she was.
She was Irish, of course.
Well, we didn't hold that against them, though. And how did we know what anybody was? You never knew anyone's
right,
last
that's right,
names.
That's right.
So we entered in 1957. Susie Cressy was my
Okay.
good friend, and we entered in 1957 and came.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the traditional, formation, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then you went out and taught grade school, elementary.
Well, first, the thing that happened before that actually was the fact that because I had studied art all those years, I was asked to do a lot of art stuff when I entered.
Okay.
Like, cards and remember the meditation board in the hallway?
Yes, yeah.
Every night.
That was you
Yes.
had to put
It's
something
my
up.
job. My
Uh-huh.
job to get this little quotation and find some, nice little illustration. And
Yeah.
stuff. It really wasn't, like kind of top level creativity, but
It's like what's done at St. Catherine Chapel now with Pauline Opplinger. Yeah.
Pauline does a lovely job
Yeah.
with those. Those are really beautiful, and
Yeah.
she really designs those and has her calligraphy is lovely and they're thoughtful and stuff. No, this was a little bit more, let's say, haphazard.
I doubt it. Go on.
But what it did in the end, I think, was when I stayed in for a semester.
Okay.
I wasn't sent out right away, and and so I went and in the middle of things they sent me to the studio after when I had this semester, and I was kind of surprised by this.
The studio.
The Studio Angelico.
Angelical, okay.
To study art. Well, really, I thought I was just there to help Janine out. I didn't think I was there to learn anything. So she was somebody who would be making these commissions for churches, and she'd be making mosaics or enamels, and I was cleaning the grout out. I was cleaning things and doing things like that, and but Joanne O'Connor was there, Sister
Oh my word,
Ioannis.
yeah.
And Ioannis was so lovely. And she had this idea that I should be learning something. It was really, I was amazed by that. And so she would have me, actually making pieces that were creative. And she had me do this tile piece, which I think found its way outside the historic area now. But it was I really, really loved that. And I took some classes, and I just loved her. I loved Janine, too. Janine was, I was a little more afraid of Janine. I was afraid of them both, let's face it. I was terrified. I used to walk up 4 flights rather than get off the elevator. I thought, I really wanted, but I loved being there, you know, and then I was sent out on mission, you know, which was a rude awakening to me. I never really put together the fact that being in the community meant you had to work. You know,
or that we were teachers.
So
I don't think we realized that.
I had no clue. So I got sent to Maybe, this little house of 4 sisters. And, you know, I knew nothing. And so, however, I was teaching, you know, sent to teach. I taught 3rd and 4th grade. I was 19 years old. And I did take a class. I did have a class in teaching reading. So that was really a big help. And I had unfortunately followed one of the women in my crowd who had gone to Maybe the year before, who was much beloved and who could do everything. Like, she could teach, she could cook, she could clean. She was so good. And I was such an idiot, you know. I could do none of those things. So I have many stories, which I will not share at this point. But my stories from Maybe are, in a way, interesting. Yeah. So I was there for 3 years. I taught 3rd and 4th grade. And these little kids, they were so wonderful, you know. I taught 3rd and 4th grade. I still remember most of them and most of their names.
That's
you know, well, they're families, you know.
Small town.
The Worsteins and the Borans and the Shackletons, and you know, all of these really, they were lovely people, wonderful people.
And they could be watching this, you know. This is going on YouTube.
I doubt if they will.
You never know.
The next year I taught 1st and 2nd grade.
Okay.
Which was even more challenging. 60 kids.
I know.
And then and the following year, 3rd and 4th again, and I taught choir because I had taken piano lessons when I was a kid, so that qualified you for almost anything that had to do with a keyboard. So that was Maybe.
It's amazing what we were sent to do. I just think, as I listen to the stories of our women, nothing but the grace of God, and the kids, hopefully, they did learn something.
You know, when Dorothy Folliard said, never make a vocation decision if you're on lunch duty, when you're on lunch duty, I could really relate to that. I remember being out in the, you know, this playground with these little kids, freezing cold, you know, and wind whipping around you, and you were getting them lined up to go back. Oh, it was such a challenge. But it was also, you know, there were also things that happened during that time that were really good, and I'm really grateful for some of the women that I lived with at that time who were really wonderful people. And then I got sent to St. Lawrence's in Detroit, which was another great grade school, and really, honestly, I taught 3rd grade for 4 years, and you know, by then I kind of, at least I knew the phonics cards, and I knew the multiplication tables. But I also could teach art with these kids because I had just one class. And that was just so much fun. You know, the class was just full of, little kids do great stuff, they do. Don't they? They just
if you let them, yes.
Yeah, they just do amazing work. And at that time, I was asked to be part of a little committee with Sister Maurice Marie, Nancy Ann Turner, to do art books for the diocese.
Oh, really?
Really, it is astonishing when you think of it.
I was in Florida at the time, so I probably didn't realize this.
Truly astonishing. And, you know, I mean, I had no real background other than one class in, you know, art education. But we worked on these and did a lot of stuff and did workshops around the city. With,
really?
With
coloring books?
Well, not exactly, no. No, with trying to teach teachers, giving teachers some ways of having art
Okay.
in their
Okay.
classrooms, which
to
would
incorporate it into
to
the
incorporate
subjects,
it
yeah.
into it. So it was really great,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was. So very shortly after that, after I graduated, which was at the, I could really tell you a lot of stories about Lawrence's too. But
Well, we can't do that with everyone. We want the next big event in your life.
the next big event. So then I taught high school. We opened Bishop Borges High School.
Correct.
And that was in 1966. We opened Borges before it was finished. So we opened it without windows, without desks, with plastic over these huge things. But that was a very interesting time, and I taught art there, and religion. And then the following year I went to Bishop Foley and taught art and religion, and taught for 3 years. But while I was at Borges, we lived at St. Suzanne's,
Right.
and I lived with Sister Joseph Louise, Jean Churches, who was in my crowd. I think you might remember
yes,
her.
Yes.
And she was going to go to Wayne State to study, and so I asked if I could also do that at the same time. So I began in 1967 taking classes at night at Wayne State, and during the summers at Wayne State.
During the riots.
I was there during the riots. Yeah. Did you were we together at?
Yes, and you gave blood, and I didn't. That's another story.
That is another story.
That's another story.
It is another story.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so all this was preparing you for another big jolt in your life, or a blessing in your life. Maybe I should say a blessing for us as a congregation.
It's a blessing.
That you were at our general chapter.
Well, the general chapter in 68, I wasn't at the general chapter, but the 68 chapter did open a lot of possibilities and changes, Again, what did I know, But during the 68 chapter, there was a kind of a renewed emphasis on education and the possibility of sending people to school to finish degrees. And so I asked shortly after that if I could go to school and get a degree in art, really study for a couple of years. I had already been studying at Wayne for a few years and wanted to get into their graduate program, but they didn't admit me into their graduate program. So they're lost.
Of course.
Well, actually, as a matter of fact, it turned out, that that at that point, the congregation wanted to start a little not a house of studies exactly, but a little house at the University of Michigan, so that people could, study there. And Sister Virginia O'Reilly asked if I would like to go to Michigan. So I said yes, and I studied there in the summer, and lived with Sister Michael Catherine, and we were supposed to find a house for us to live in. Part of that challenge was, kind of going around and trying to find some place that would rent to 5 women. Well, that was not the easiest thing, but in the end we did find a place, and at the end of that summer I did get admitted into their graduate program. And so one of the great experiences of my life was being there and being at that house where I shared, that house had Sharon Weber, Eileen Rice, Catherine Griffiths, Kathleen Steiner, who was Sister Ruth Steiner's niece, who I'm still friends with, Liz Kazel, who you would remember,
yes,
and Michael Catherine, Shirley Hodgson. And so we rented a house from a professor who was on sabbatical, and I studied art, and all of us, during the course of those years, either became teaching assistants or at Michigan.
At Michigan, yeah.
Yeah, or research assistants, and we, kind of all labored together as Sharon passed all of her tests, and Eileen did all of these great things, and we blundered through, had exhibitions and stuff. We used to share each other's work and stuff. And they were such great people.
Great community life. Yeah.
It was just a wonderful thing. So that was a huge change for me. I just loved that, and I was able to paint. And my teachers were wonderful people. I loved them. And then I came to Siena
Okay.
in 71.
And but I was jumping ahead, so it was 68, but in 78 at the General Chapter.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. In 78, through some strange twist of fate, I was elected to the General Council. I was
Youngster that you were.
youngster that I was. No, well, I mean, it wasn't that I was young. It was just that I was this, I was this kind of artist who, and, I was teaching art, and, fortunately for the congregation, everyone else was really good at what they did.
Don't put yourself down.
We had Carol Johannes, and Carol Jean McDonald, Catherine DeClerc, Nadine Foley, and myself, and that it was another huge challenge. But I'll tell you, it was one of the great learning experiences of my life.
Oh, I'm sure.
Learning of being part of that group of people, and being part of the whole congregation, kind of getting such a change, such a bigger view of what was happening and what we could do and what we were about. It was amazing.
So
amazing.
that was 6 years of your life.
4 years.
Oh, 4. You only were 4.
That was 4 years.
Oh.
Yeah, that was 4 years. And then in 1982, I finished that term and was thinking that I'd go back to Siena to teach, but the woman who was teaching, had taken my place there, really was kind of hesitant to give that or to share that job. So I was looking for something that I could do part-time, and I started teaching. I wanted to study spiritual direction. I had been studying some theology, wanted to study spiritual direction, and I also went to Michigan, and they had part-time teaching there. So I taught several classes at Michigan, lived here in Adrian with Oakwood, which was another wonderful.
How long were you there?
At Michigan?
No, at Oakwood. That was
I was one of the people who started Oakwood with Sharon.
Sharon,
Sharon was a little bit more steady to it. She was there for like 40 years. I was only there for 7 years, I think, or for about 4 years. Then I lived here at what is now Ratisbon, and then came back there.
Yeah.
But then, after a couple of years of teaching part-time at Michigan, they hired me as assistant dean. And so I moved to Ann Arbor and worked at Michigan for all told, about 15 years.
I know there's a lot that's happened in your life in between there, but I just, our time is limited. But you did a lot of preaching, I think, through your creativity in other countries. Could you just share with us, as briefly, your experiences in Bolivia and all those places that you were in?
Okay, well, I can tell you that in 1989, Pam Millenbach had been in Peru for about 7 or 8 years at that point. And she was a good friend, and she would come every summer, and she'd bring back, she'd come to visit her parents, she'd bring back these little cloth pictures called quadros.
Yeah.
And I would put them in the drawer and, think about them a little bit or put them up. And she kept wanting me to come to Peru and visit her and visit Peru. And I was hesitant to do that. But I finally thought in 1989 that I would do this. I would come for a few weeks and maybe talk to some of the women who were making quadros and bring a little show back that I could have at Michigan.
I'm sorry you didn't bring one with you. Would have been nice.
That's true.
Yeah.
True.
Anyway, go on.
But I went hesitantly to Peru, and found that I just loved it. I mean, Pam and Mary Kay did such great work there. Pam was working with handicapped kids getting these little kids to surgery, helping them, get help they needed. Mary Kay was running a library and a common dining room. And I was with them during those times, and I walked with them into these very simple places, these homes that people had.
Your time with them was just very transformative, I think.
Well, it was wonderful. And I brought back these quadros, and I wanted to go back there practically, I mean, I wanted to be, but anyway, they left had to leave after a couple of years because of health reasons, and because there was this terrorist group that was operating very close to them called Sendero Luminoso. And to make a long story short, I went back with Pam in '91 to close that house. But I tried to figure out ways to continue working with the Quadros to get them sent back to me. And so I've done this. I work now with one of the women who worked with Pam. And she works with the women and sends the work to us. We've been working with the Quadros and the women who've made Quadros for about 30 years.
Unbelievable. Those quadros are
a
meditation. Yeah.
We're going to have a show of them at Inai.
Oh, good.
Next
November.
November.
Oh, November. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that has been really, that was just a blessing. We've shown these pieces like in about 60 places.
Yes. Yeah.
All around the country, like including the Field Museum in Chicago, the Textile Museum in Toronto. And in 1992, I went with my friend Mame Jackson and a couple of the faculty members from Michigan, Al Hinton. We got a little grant from Michigan to go to Brazil for the first time, to go to Salvador to investigate African connections of African art in Brazil, the influences of African art in Brazil. Because, as not too many people knew, the enslaved Africans were brought into Brazil at 10 times the rate that they were in the United States. So we wondered if there was any mark or any influence that could be still felt by that. Mame had studied African American art and wanted to kind of see these connections. And I had been working with the Quadros and wanted just to understand popular art there better. So we went for the first time to Brazil. We went pretty naively, thinking that perhaps people there would understand English. They didn't. They didn't, so demanded that, we learn a little Portuguese.
Portuguese is that it?
Yeah, so we've gone back probably about more than a dozen times and have created a couple of exhibitions, one of which has been this sponsored by the National Endowment for the Humanities, that's toured the country and has gone to 30 different places.
The other thing that you were part of, the Catholic Sisters.
Women in Spirit.
Women in Spirit. Tell us a little bit about that. I think we're going to have to do a session 2 with you.
In 2006, it was approaching the 50th anniversary of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious. And they put out a plea to ask people how the Leadership Conference should celebrate. And somebody had the great idea of mounting an exhibition at the Smithsonian. And they put Helen Garvey, who I'd worked with on the 25th anniversary, in charge. And so she called and asked if I would help. And I thought that it probably was improbable that we would have an exhibition on the history of Catholic Sisters at the Smithsonian. But I thought, of course, I'll help.
Yeah.
So it turned out, however, to be this wonderful project of this beautiful exhibition. Helen and a group of sisters raised several $1 million to support this. It traveled to 9 different sites in the United States. And again, it was a great learning experience because we worked with remarkable people to create this exhibition, which was probably which was seen at the Smithsonian,
Right.
at Ellis Island, in Cleveland, in Los Angeles, in Dallas, Texas. I mean,
Every place around America. Did it go overseas?
No.
You didn't send it to
Unfortunately,
Rome.
it was eventually the artifacts and things were returned to their
Yeah.
communities.
I think I saw it in Cleveland.
At the Maltz Museum, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really a remarkable place.
It really was.
Yeah.
A great story about us.
Yeah.
So we haven't touched on a lot of things in your life. Is there?
It's been an interesting life, Peg.
Yeah, I know. It's people like you that make other sisters say, "Oh, I can't tell my story because I don't, not like Cervenka, but we don't want to hear more of Cervenka. I want to hear about you." But anyway, there's just a lot more enriching times in your life. And is there something in particular that you would like to leave with us?
Oh, well, one of the things there is I thought about this ahead of time. This isn't a spontaneous thing.
Okay.
But one of the women who was working with us in Women in Spirit came one day. Her name was Karen Kennelly, who is a St. Joseph sister. Came one day and just shared this beautiful little poem with us. And it just has always resonated with me. And the poem is from Lao Tzu. And it goes like this. It's 10,000 flowers in spring, the moon in autumn, a cool breeze in summer, snow in winter. If your mind is not clouded by unnecessary things, this is the best time of your life.
Wow.
So,
Amen.
I really love that.
It is. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's your life. Well, thank you, Barb Cervenka. Sister James Annette.
Thank you, Peg Flynn.
Yes, it's been a delight to spend this time with you. And I especially appreciated your spontaneity in saying yes to, really, this is an important part of our history in the congregation. So,
Well, when I was thinking about this, I just thought of all of these extraordinary women who have been, like yourself, who've been part of my
our
life.
Yeah.
And, to whom I'm so immensely grateful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
We are blessed.
to grow to be here and to grow old among this group of wonderful women and good friends is a great privilege. So, thank you.
So thank you.